The champagne flutes shattered against the marble floor of the Celestial Ballroom. But the sound couldn't drown out Desdemona's words. "I'm sorry, Lysander." Ragnar came back, and I can't marry you. My fiancée before our wedding, my fiancée of 2 years, chose her toxic ex over me, leaving me standing in my tuxedo among the ruins of our dream reception. But what Desdemona didn't know was that her betrayal would become the catalyst for the most devastating revenge in her social elite history. Because while she was busy crawling back to Ragnar Reed, the real estate mogul who destroyed her self-worth for 5 years, I discovered something extraordinary about myself and ability that would let me see through every lie, every manipulation, every hidden agenda in our circle of wealth and power. And when I met Eira Reed, Ragnar's brilliant and beautiful sister who despised everything her brother represented, I realized the perfect way to make them both pay. This is the story of how I turned heartbreak into an empire, and how the woman who shattered my world unknowingly handed me the keys to hers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 2 years. 730 days of building something I thought was unbreakable. That's how long Desdemona Vance and I had been together before she decided to detonate our entire future with a single phone call. I should have seen it coming. Signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs through our relationship. But I'd been too busy building my hospitality empire to notice the cracks forming in my personal life. As the founder and CEO of Hayes Luxury Events, I specialized in creating magical moments for Northshire's elite million-dollar weddings, corporate galas that made headlines, anniversary celebrations that people talked about for years. Ironic. Really. Hair catching the morning light as she scrolled through her phone with that distant look she'd been wearing more frequently lately. She looked stunning as always, the kind of effortless beauty that had first caught my attention at the Northshire Arts Foundation Gala 2 years ago. Back then, she'd been fresh out of a devastating breakup with Ragnar Reed, vulnerable and looking for someone who would treat her like the goddess she was. I'd been that someone. I'd worshipped her, built my world around her smile, planned a future where she would never have to doubt her worth again. "The flowers arrive at noon," I said, reviewing the checklist on my tablet. Our wedding was exactly 24 hours away, and every detail had been orchestrated with the precision that made my company the most. It's a Tafter event planning firm on the East Coast. The string quartet will be here for sound check at 2, and the caterers want to do a final tasting at 4. She nodded absently, still staring at her phone. "Ma'am, Day." I reached over and touched her hand. "You seem distracted." "Pre-wedding nerves?" she said quickly, pulling her hand away, "just thinking about tomorrow." Should have demanded to know what was really going through her mind. Instead, I leaned over and kissed her forehead, tasting the expensive French skincare products she used religiously. "Tomorrow is going to be perfect," I murmured against her. "Skin, the most beautiful day of our lives." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Perfect.
Oh.
The rest of the morning passed in a blur of final preparations. I spent hours at the Celestial Ballroom, my crown jewel venue that overlooked the dramatic cliffs of Thornfield Heights. Every chandelier sparkled. Every flower arrangement was positioned with mathematical precision. Every table setting gleamed like something from a fairy tale. 300 of Northshire's most influential people would witness our union tomorrow. Business moguls, politicians, celebrities, and socialites who treated weddings like Broadway productions. My assistant, Corliss Hayes, no relation, despite the shared surnames, bustled around with her usual efficiency, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "The champagne has been chilled to exactly 38 degrees, she reported. "The photographer wants to do a lighting test in an hour," and Mrs. Thornfield called to confirm that her husband's dietary restrictions have been accommodated. Excellent. And Desdemona's dress, hanging in the bridal suite, steamed and ready. "It's breathtaking, Mr. Hayes. She's going to look like a princess." A princess. That's exactly what I'd wanted to give her, a fairy tale wedding that would erase every painful memory Ragnar Reed had left her with. 5 years she'd wasted on that narcissistic real estate mogul. 5 years of emotional manipulation and psychological games that had left her, believing she wasn't worth fighting for. I'd spent our entire relationship proving her wrong. My phone buzzed at 3:17 p.m. A text from Desdemona. "Can we talk? It's important." I was in the middle of adjusting the lighting for the ceremony backdrop. But something in those 5 words made my blood run cold. I called her immediately. "Where are you?" I asked when she picked up. "At home, Lysander?" Her voice cracked, and I could hear her crying. "I need to see you. Please come home." I dropped everything. Literally. The lighting technician caught the expensive equipment as it slipped from my hands, and I was running for my car before I could form a coherent explanation. The drive from Thornfield Heights to our penthouse normally took 25 minutes. I made it in 15. I found her in our living room, still in the silk robe she'd been wearing that morning. Her phone was in her hands, and her face was streaked with mascara. The sight of her crying always destroyed MIT, brought out every protective instinct the first possessed. Day was wrong. I sat beside her on the white leather sofa, reaching for her hands. "Whatever it is, we can fix it. Can fix anything." She looked at me then, and I saw my future crumbling in her eyes. "Ragnar called." She whispered 2 words. 2 simple words that felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Okay," I said carefully, "and he wants me back." The words tumbled out in a rush, like she couldn't get them out fast enough. "He said he's been thinking about us for months, that he made a mistake letting me go. He's changed, Lysander. He's in therapy, he's working on himself, and he stopped." I held up a hand, my mind reeling. Just ... Stop. "You're telling me this? Why exactly? 'Cause you needed a good laugh before our wedding?" She flinched at the bitterness in my voice. "It's not a joke. He means it this time. I stood up, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bay. "Desdemona, this is the same man who cheated on you with 3 different women. The same man who told you that you were too needy, too emotional, not sophisticated enough for his social circle. The man who made you cry yourself to sleep for months." "Know what he did?" she said quietly. "But people can change." I turned to face her, searching her expression for any sign that this was some kind of pre-wedding panic attack. A temporary moment of insanity that we could laugh about later. Instead, I saw something that made my soul collapse. Certainty. It wasn't a question. She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I never got closure with him. Our relationship ended so badly, and I've spent 2 years wondering what might have happened if he'd fought for me the way you have. Now he's finally fighting, and I and you, what?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can marry you tomorrow, knowing that I'll always wonder what if." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Through the windows, I could see the Celestial Ballroom in the distance, its spires catching the afternoon light. In 18 hours, 300 people would gather there to watch me marry the woman I loved more than my own life. "So what are you saying exactly?" The sight of it felt like salt in an open wound. "I'm saying I need to see if there's still something there with Ragnar. Everything is already paid for. Everything is ready." "No. And you're willing to throw it all away for a man who treated you like garbage for 5 years. She looked away. "It's not about throwing anything away. It's about being honest about my feelings." Honest. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. How long had she been dishonest? How long had she been thinking about him while lying next to me? How long had she been planning this moment while I'd been planning our future? "Get out," I said quietly. "Lysander, get out of my house. Get out of my life. Go run back to your precious Ragnar and see how long it takes him to destroy you again." She stood there for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something else. Then she nodded and walked toward our bedroom, her former bedroom, to pack her things. I stood at the window, watching the sun set over Willowbrook Bay, and tried to figure out how I was going to tell 300 people that there would be no wedding tomorrow. That the woman I'd given everything to had decided I wasn't worth choosing after all. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and just like that, Desdemona Vance walked out of my life and back into Ragnar Reed's arms. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I had 20 hours to cancel the wedding of the century, and a lifetime to figure out how to live with the fact that I'd never been enough. The next 18 hours were a masterclass in public humiliation, disguised as damage control. It started with the phone calls. Dozens of them. 300 guests, 27 vendors, 4 different media outlets who'd been given exclusive coverage rights, and one very expensive photographer who'd flown in from Milan specifically for our wedding. Each conversation was a fresh knife wound, each explanation a new level of mortification. Mr. Hayes? This is Catherine Blackwood from the Northshire Tribune. We're supposed to cover your wedding tomorrow for our society pages, but we're hearing rumors. No rumors, I said, my voice hoarse from the previous 47 calls. The wedding has been canceled. Personal reasons. Canceled? Bet Mr. Hayes. This is the social event of the season. Our readers will want to know the wedding is canceled, I repeated, then hung up before she could ask the question I'd been hearing all morning. Why? Had Northshire's most successful luxury event planner, a man who orchestrated perfect celebrations for a living, failed so spectacularly at his own? Why had the woman everyone called the luckiest girl in Northshire decided to run back to her notoriously toxic ex-boyfriend instead of marrying the man who worshipped her? I didn't have answers that wouldn't make me sound like a pathetic fool. Corliss stood in the corner of my office like a silent sentinel, her usual efficiency replaced by shell-shocked numbness. She'd spent 6 months planning this wedding alongside me, had invested as much emotional energy in its success as I had. Now, she was watching her boss's reputation crumble in real time. The florists want to know if they should deliver the arrangements anyway, she said quietly. They're already made, and the contract specifies. Tell them to donate everything. To the hospital, I said, not looking up from my laptop where I was composing the most humiliating email of my professional career. The arrangements, the cake, all of it. Write it off as charity, and the venue. I finally looked up at her. Corliss had been with me for 3 years. Had seen me navigate every crisis from demanding bridezillas to natural disasters that threatened to ruin million-dollar celebrations. She'd never seen me defeated, until now. Leave everything exactly as it is, I said. Let people see what a canceled dream looks like. By noon, the whispers had started. Northshire's high society ran on gossip like a car ran on gasoline, and news of my spectacular humiliation was premium fuel. My phone buzzed constantly with text messages from acquaintances who were suddenly very concerned about my well-being. From Richard Thornfield, heard about tomorrow. Sorry, mate, these things happen. From Victoria Sterling, darling, if you need anything. A shoulder, a drink, a good lawyer, call me. From dozens of others, variations of false sympathy. Hiding barely contained glee at watching someone successful stumble so publicly. But the message that broke something inside me came at 2:17 p.m. Think from a number I didn't recognize. Saw the news about the wedding. Just wanted you to know, Day is in good hands now. Thanks for keeping her warm for me. R. Ragnar. The bastard had somehow gotten my personal number just to twist the knife deeper. I stared at the message until the words blurred together. Then, I did something I'd never done in my professional life. I walked out of my office without telling anyone where I was going. My feet carried me to Thornfield Heights, to the Celestial Ballroom where our wedding should have been happening in 6 hours. The staff had followed my instructions. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. White roses cascaded from every surface. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the marble floor. And 300 chairs sat in perfect rows facing an altar where I should have been promising to love, honor, and cherish the woman who'd destroyed me. I walked down the aisle in my jeans and wrinkled dress shirt, my hands in my pockets, and tried to imagine what it would have felt like to see Desdemona walking toward me in her princess dress. Instead, all I could picture was her in Ragnar's arms, probably laughing about how icily she'd escaped the boring life I'd offered her. Beautiful setup. I turned to find Miles Taylor, the head groundskeeper for Thornfield Heights, standing in the doorway. He was a quiet man in his 50s. Someone I'd worked with dozens of times, but never really talked to beyond professional necessities. Was supposed to be, I said. He walked into the ballroom, his work boots echoing on the marble. 23 years I've been working here, Seen a lot of weddings, a lot of parties. This would have been something special. Yeah, well, sometimes special isn't enough. Miles stopped beside me, looking up at the elaborate floral arrangements. You know what I've learned in 23 years of watching rich people celebrate? Most of them are just pretending. It's putting on shows for each other, playing roles they think they're supposed to play. But every once in a while, you see something real. Someone who actually cares about making other people happy, not just showing off their wealth. I looked at him, surprised by the unexpected wisdom. You're one of the real ones, Mr. Hayes. Always have been. Whatever happened here, it's not because you weren't enough. It's because she didn't deserve what you were offering. Something about his words, or maybe just the kindness in his weathered face, cracked the dam I'd been building all day. Hours of humiliation, rage, and self-doubt came pouring out in ugly, wrenching sobs that echoed through the empty ballroom. I cried for the future I'd lost, for the woman I'd loved who'd never really loved me back, for the business reputation that would never fully recover from this scandal, for the naive belief that good men who worked hard and loved deeply would be rewarded with happiness. When the storm finally passed, I found myself sitting on the floor of my own canceled wedding, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of flowers that would never be admired, listening to the gentle tick of expensive Swiss clocks that were counting down to nothing. That's when I heard it. A sound that shouldn't have been possible, voices coming from the empty venue next door. Not just voices, but whispered conversations, heated arguments, intimate confessions, as if the walls had suddenly become transparent to sound. I stood up slowly, following the impossible audio to its source.
The whispers grew louder, more distinct.
And suddenly I could make out individual words. Told her he'd never find out about the affair. Embezzled $3 million from the charity fund. Pictures are hidden in the safe behind the painting. The voices weren't coming from next door. They were coming from inside my own head, carrying secrets that shouldn't exist. Knowledge that belonged to people who weren't even there. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. Either I was having a complete mental breakdown, or something impossible had just happened to me. Miles had left at some point during my collapse, and I was alone in the ballroom with voices that couldn't be real but felt more true than anything I'd ever heard. By the time I made it back to my car, one thing had become crystal clear. The old Lysander Hayes, the man who believed in fairy tales and happy endings, had died in that ballroom. Whoever I was becoming would be someone completely different. Someone who could hear the lies that everyone else missed. Someone who would never be blindsided again. The voices followed me home, not continuously. That would have driven me to madness within hours. Instead, they came in waves, like radio stations drifting in and out of frequency. As I sat in my empty penthouse that first night, nursing a glass of whiskey that burned less than the hollow ache in my chest, I began to understand that something fundamental had changed in my brain. It started with Mrs. Chen from the apartment next door. Through the thin walls of luxury that weren't quite as soundproof as advertised, I'd always been able to hear the occasional argument or loud television. But now I was hearing her thoughts thoughts about the gambling debts she'd hidden from her husband for 3 years. Impossible, I muttered, pressing my palms against my temples. This is just stress, trauma, a psychological break. But the whispers persisted, growing clearer with each passing hour. By sunrise, I'd accepted the insane reality. I could somehow perceive the hidden truths people carried, their secrets, their lies, their buried shame. The emotional devastation of losing Desdemona had apparently rewired something in my brain, creating a connection to the deceptive thoughts of everyone around me. The first real test came when Corliss arrived for work Monday morning. She knocked tentatively on my office door, clutching her tablet-like armor, her usually perfect composure cracked with worry. "Mr. Hayes? I brought your coffee. How are you feeling? How are you feeling?" I looked up from my desk where I'd been pretending to review contracts, studying her face as she approached. Corliss had worked for me for 3 years, had been the perfect assistant, organized, discreet, unfailingly loyal. I'd never questioned her dedication. "I'm fine," I lied, accepting the coffee. "Just tired." She nodded sympathetically, and that's when I heard it, a whisper that didn't come from her lips. He looks terrible. Poor man, though honestly, if Desdemona was stupid enough to go back to that monster Ragnar, maybe he's better off. God knows I would have never let him go if I'd been in her place. 3 years I've been hoping he'd notice me as more than just his assistant. I nearly choked on my coffee. Corliss rushed forward, her hand hovering near my shoulder. Are you all right? Should I call Dr. Manning? He's so broken. I wish I could. Comfort him properly. Hold him. Show him that not all women are as foolish as Desdemona. I'm fine, I managed, my voice rough. Just give me a moment. She backed away reluctantly, and I pretended to cough while processing the revelation. My efficient professional assistant had been harboring romantic feelings for me for years. Information I never would have discovered through normal means. Information that suddenly seemed incredibly valuable. Corliss, I said carefully, testing the waters. I want you to know how much I appreciate your loyalty, especially now when things are ... difficult. Her cheeks flushed pink. Of course, Mr. Hayes, I would do anything for you. Anything. If only he knew how much I mean that. A plan began forming in my mind. Not romantic. I wasn't ready for that kind of complexity yet. Professional. Personal. The kind of absolute loyalty that couldn't be bought, only earned through carefully managed emotional investment. Over the next few days, I conducted small experiments. I attended the weekly Northshire Chamber of Commerce meeting, listening to Mayor Patterson deliver his standard speech about economic development, while his thoughts revealed his terror about the FBI investigation into his construction contracts. I had lunch with Victoria Sterling, nodding sympathetically as she complained about her husband's drinking while her internal monologue detailed her own cocaine addiction that she funded through embezzlement from her family's charity foundation. The information was intoxicating. Every conversation became a treasure trove of ammunition. Every social interaction, a chess game where I could see my opponent's cards. But it was the encounter with Jonathan Blackwood that really showed me the true potential of my new ability. Blackwood owned the Northshire Tribune, the newspaper that had been particularly vicious in their coverage of my cancelled wedding. He'd published a society column that painted me as a naive romantic who'd been publicly humiliated by a smarter woman. The piece had been devastating for my business reputation. I found him at the Willowbrook Club's bar on Thursday evening, holding court with several other prominent businessmen over expensive scotch. He was regaling them with gossip about various society figures, including some particularly cruel observations about my spectacular failure to read his own fiancée's true feelings. I approached the group with a smile that felt like putting on a mask. Gentlemen, good evening. The conversation died abruptly. Blackwood's face showed a flicker of embarrassment. He clearly hadn't expected me to venture into public so soon after my humiliation. Lysander, he said with forced joviality, good to see you out and about. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I replied, signaling the bartender for a whiskey. Actually, I wanted to thank you for the article. Blackwood blinked in surprise. Thank me. For opening my eyes to the truth about Desdemona, you were right, he was naive. I should have seen the signs. I took a sip of my drink, studying his face. Speaking of seeing signs, how's your son doing at Harvard? I heard there was some trouble with his grades. Blackwood's expression tightened slightly. He's fine. He's just adjusting to college life. How the hell does he know about Timothy's academic? Probation. We paid $20,000 to keep that quiet. Glad to hear it, I said smoothly. These things have a way of working themselves out, especially when you have the right connections. Like your friendship with Dean Morrison, I'm sure that helps. The color drained from Blackwood's face. Dean Morrison was the Harvard administrator. He'd been bribing to keep his son enrolled despite failing grades. It was information that shouldn't have been available to anyone outside their inner circle. Christ, he knows. How does he know who told him? I'm not sure what you're implying, Blackwood said carefully. Not implying anything, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It's just making conversation among friends. After all, we all have our challenges, don't we? Some of us just handle them more discreetly than others. I finished my drink and stood to leave, placing a hand on Blackwood's shoulder. Oh, and Jonathan. I'd love to see a follow-up article about how sometimes what appears to be a setback is actually an opportunity for growth. I think your readers would find that inspiring, don't you? I walked away before he could respond, but his thoughts followed me like echoes he knows. Somehow he knows about Harvard, about Morrison, probably about everything. How is that possible? No. The next week's Tribune featured a surprisingly positive piece about resilience in the face of adversity. Using my cancellation as an example of how successful people could turn temporary setbacks into opportunities for reinvention. As I read the article over my morning coffee, I realized that I'd discovered something far more valuable than the ability to hear secrets. I'd learned how to weaponize them. The old Lysander haze had been destroyed in that ballroom, but what emerged from the ashes was something far more dangerous. Someone who could see through every facade, hear every lie, and use that knowledge to rebuild himself into exactly the kind of man who would never be betrayed again. And as I planned my next moves, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Northshire's elite were hiding, and how I could use them to construct my revenge against the people who thought they could destroy me. The game was just beginning, and for the first time in my life, I was playing with a full deck while everyone else stumbled around blind. Within 6 weeks of my transformation, Hayes Luxury Events was booked solid for the next 18 months. It wasn't magic, it was strategy. Armed with the ability to hear every client's deepest fears, desires, and financial limitations, I could craft proposals that seemed telepathically perfect. When Mrs. Thornfield wanted a golden anniversary celebration, I didn't just hear her say she wanted something elegant. I heard her internal panic about her husband's early-stage dementia, her desperate need to create one last perfect memory before his mind faded completely. 50 years together, and I can already see him slipping away. This has to be perfect. I'd pay anything to give him one more night where he remembers us the way we were, ... So I crafted an evening that transported them back to 1973, the exact music they'd danced to at their wedding, recreations of the menu. From their honeymoon hotel, even tracking down their original wedding photographer to capture new memories in his distinctive style. The event was spectacular. The Thornfields cried tears of joy, and word spread through Northshire's elite like wildfire. Lysander Hayes didn't just plan events. He created miracles. My reputation for uncanny insight became legendary. When mogul Finch Sterling hired me for his daughter's Sweet 16, I heard his thoughts about his guilty relief that this lavish party might distract from the divorce papers he'd be serving his wife the following month. If I can just get through this weekend without Rebecca finding out about the separation agreement, ... Hyacinth deserves one perfect day before her world gets turned upside down, ... I designed a celebration that subtly reinforced family unity while giving his daughter memories strong enough to weather the coming storm. 3 months later, when the divorce became public, Hyacinth Sterling sent me a handwritten note. "Thank you for giving me something beautiful to hold on to." The financial success followed naturally. When you could hear exactly what people were willing to spend, negotiating became effortless. Mayor Patterson's wife wanted a fundraising gala, but worried about budget overruns. I heard her real ceiling 30% higher than she'd stated and structured my proposal accordingly. The mayor himself posed no challenge. I already knew about his FBI troubles, which meant he'd approve anything his wife wanted without questions. But the real power came from the network I was building. Every event connected me to new clients, and every client revealed secrets that connected to other secrets. Northshire's elite lived in an intricate web of affairs, financial crimes, and social scandals. And I was learning to navigate that web like a spider sensing vibrations on every strand. The breakthrough moment came. At Zephyr Sterling's corporate anniversary party, Sterling Industries was Northshire's largest employer, and Zephyr himself was the kind of old money patriarch who controlled half the city council through carefully placed donations and favors. During the planning meeting, he seemed distracted, barely engaging with my presentation about theme options and entertainment packages. That's when I heard his real concerns. If the SEC investigation goes public before the quarterly earnings report, we're finished. 20 years of skimming pension funds, and some junior accountant stumbles across the wrong spreadsheet. I need 6 months to clean this up, but we might not have 6 weeks? ... I leaned forward slightly, adjusting my approach. Mr. Sterling, I understand you're dealing with some complex business pressures right now. Perhaps we should schedule this celebration for later in the year. Sometimes timing is everything. His eyes sharpened, studying my face. What do you mean by that? It's just that successful men like yourself often have multiple priorities competing for attention. I'd rather wait and create something perfect when you can fully enjoy it than rush into an event when you're distracted by other matters. How does he know? What has he heard? Smiled reassuringly. I found that the most successful events happen when my clients can focus completely on celebration rather than cogenatory concerns. The color drained from his face. We stared at each other for a long moment, two players suddenly aware that the stakes had changed completely. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Hayes? Nothing at all, I said smoothly. Simply observing that you seem to have a lot on your mind. Perhaps we could schedule a follow-up meeting in a few months when things are ... clearer. He knows. Christ, he knows about the investigation. How much does he know? Can I trust him, or do I need to eliminate this problem? The thought about eliminating me was disturbing, but not entirely surprising. Men like Sterling didn't accumulate power by allowing loose threads to remain untied. Mr. Sterling, I said carefully, I want you to know that my reputation is built on discretion. My clients trust me because I understand that successful people often face complex challenges. I'm in the business of creating beautiful moments, not judging the circumstances that make those moments necessary. Relief flooded. His thoughts followed immediately by calculation. Smart, discreet, could be useful. Better to have him as an ally than a threat. I appreciate that, Lysander. Perhaps we should discuss a retainer arrangement. I may need your services more frequently than just this anniversary celebration. Within a week, I had a 6-figure annual contract with Sterling Industries as their exclusive event consultant, essentially a well-paid silence agreement with the bonus of planning occasional parties. More importantly, I'd gained an ally with connections throughout Northshire's power structure. The pattern repeated with other clients. Each event led to new secrets, new leverage, new opportunities. I wasn't just rebuilding my business. I was constructing an entirely new kind of enterprise. Hayes Luxury Events was becoming the front for something much more valuable. An information brokerage service for the elite. Corliss proved invaluable in this evolution. Her romantic feelings made her fiercely loyal, and her natural organizational skills helped me catalog and cross-reference the intelligence I was gathering. I still hadn't acknowledged her feelings directly, but I'd begun treating her more like a partner than an employee higher salary. Better title, inclusion in strategic planning meetings. He's starting to see me differently, her thoughts revealed. During one late-night planning session, it's not just as his assistant anymore. Maybe there's hope. ... The hope in her internal monologue was both useful and slightly heartbreaking. I wasn't ready for romance might never be ready after Desdemona's betrayal, but I could offer something almost as powerful: purpose. Importance. The thrill of being part of something bigger than event planning. 3 months after my wedding cancellation, I attended the Northshire Business Awards dinner. Last year, I'd gone as Desdemona's devoted fiancée, just another face in the crowd. This year, I arrived alone but not lonely. I was surrounded by an invisible network of obligations, secrets, and carefully managed relationships. As I worked the room, I could hear the whispered thoughts of everyone I passed. He's different now. Harder, more dangerous. I heard he knows things about people. Things that could ruin careers. ... Smart, to stay on his good side. Never know when you might need a favor. ... The transformation was complete. I was no longer the heartbroken romantic who'd been publicly humiliated by his fiancée's betrayal. I was Lysander Hayes, the man who could make or break reputations with a whisper, who held the secrets of half of Northshire's elite, who had turned personal devastation into professional dominance. And as I scanned the room, I couldn't help but smile at the beautiful irony. Desdemona had thought she was discarding a weak man for a powerful one. Instead, She'd created exactly the kind of dangerous opponent that men like Ragnar Reed should fear most. The game was accelerating. I was winning. She walked into my life at the Northshire Cultural Center Gala, and I immediately understood why the room seemed to shift around her presence. Eira Reed moved with the kind of confident grace that belonged to someone completely comfortable in their own skin. Dark hair fell in elegant waves past her shoulders, and intelligent green eyes surveyed the crowd with the calculating precision of someone who missed nothing. When she smiled, genuinely smiled, not the practiced society expression most people wore it, transformed her entire face. Another tedious evening of watching Northshire's elite pretend to care about the arts. Her thoughts drifted toward me as she accepted a glass of champagne. At least the proceeds go to something worthwhile this time. I found myself approaching her before I'd consciously decided to move. "Ms. Reed," I said, extending my hand. "Lysander Hayes." She turned those sharp green eyes on me, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine intrigue from someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me. "The event planner," she said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "I've heard fascinating things about your ... recent successes. So this is the man who's got half of Northshire's power brokers walking on eggshells. Interesting. He's not what I expected." "And you're Ragnar Reed's sister," I replied, watching her expression carefully. Her smile became razor-sharp. "Unfortunately, yes. Though I prefer to be known for my own accomplishments rather than my brother's reputation. If he's fishing for information about Ragnar, he'll be disappointed. I have no loyalty to that monster." The contempt in her thoughts was genuine and absolute. This wasn't sibling rivalry, this was something deeper. "I can appreciate that," I said. "Family can be ... complicated." An understatement. She studied my face with open curiosity. "You were supposed to marry Desdemona Vance, weren't you? Wedding that never happened? Everyone knows about that disaster. Wonder how he feels about discussing it." "Ancient history," I said smoothly. "Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing something you thought you wanted." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a remarkably philosophical perspective. For someone who is publicly humiliated, he's not bitter. That's unexpected. Most men would be destroyed by what happened to him. Would you rather I be bitter?" I asked, genuinely curious about her answer. She considered this seriously. "No, bitter men are boring. They're predictable. They spend so much energy nursing their wounds that they forget to actually live. This conversation is more interesting than anything I've had in months. We talked for an hour, and I found myself doing something I'd almost forgotten how to do, having a genuine conversation. Eira didn't need to be manipulated or managed. Thoughts were as direct as her words. Refreshingly honest in a world built on lies and facades. When she mentioned her work with domestic violence shelters, I heard the passion behind it. If I can help even one woman escape the kind of hell Ragnar put Desdemona through, it's worth every dollar and every sleepless night. "That's important work," I said quietly. "Someone has to do it." Her voice hardened. "Slightly. I've seen what men like my brother do to women. The psychological damage can last years, even after they escape. Like what he did to Desdemona, and God knows how many others." The realization hit me like lightning. Eira had watched Ragnar destroy Desdemona firsthand. She knew exactly what kind of man her brother was, and she despised him for it. "Have you ever thought about expanding your program?" I asked. "I know several people who might be interested in supporting that kind of work." "Is he offering to help?" "That's unexpected. Most people just write a check to salve their conscience." "I'd be interested in discussing that," she said, and I heard the genuine hope in her thoughts. We exchanged numbers. And as the evening wound down, I found myself reluctant to see her leave. "Eira," I said as she prepared to go, "would you have dinner with me this week? Somewhere we can talk without the crowd?" She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I'd like that. He's nothing like what I expected. Nothing like Ragnar at all." 3 days later, we were sitting in a quiet corner of Northshire's most exclusive restaurant, and I was learning what it felt like to be genuinely seen by someone. "You're different from what people say about you," Eira observed over dessert. What do people say? That you're dangerous, that you know things you shouldn't, that you've become someone to be feared rather than dismissed. All true, but there's something else, something that feels almost vulnerable underneath all that power. And what do you think? She leaned back in her chair, studying me. I think you're exactly as dangerous as people say. But I also think you were hurt badly enough to build very impressive armor. Very impressive armor. The question is whether there's still a real person underneath all that. Protection. The accuracy of her assessment was startling. Most people saw either the old, naive Lysander or the new, calculating one. Eira saw both. Armor can be useful, I said carefully. It can also be a prison. We stared at each other across the table. I felt something shift between USA. Recognition of shared understanding. That's when my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood freeze. Heard you're seeing Ragnar's sister? Interesting choice. Desdemona? Somehow she'd found out about my dinner with Eira. Bad news? Eira asked, noticing my expression. I showed her the message. Her face hardened. Desdemona's keeping tabs on you? And on me, apparently. Ragnar must have told her. He probably finds this hilarious. Does that bother you? Mai asked. No, she said, firmly, but it tells me exactly what I need to know about their relationship. They're still playing games, still trying to control narratives. If they think they can use me to hurt him, they're about to learn they chose the wrong target. Looking at her determined expression, I realized I'd found something I hadn't been looking for. An ally who understood the game I was playing. Someone who had her own reasons to see Ragnar Reed brought down. Eira, I said quietly, there's something you should know about me, about what I've become since the wedding. She leaned forward, those intelligent eyes focused entirely on me. I'm listening. And for the first time since my transformation began, I found myself wanting to tell someone the complete truth. 8 months after Desdemona shattered my heart, I stood at the altar of the grand cathedral overlooking Northshire Bay, watching the most beautiful woman I'd ever known walk toward me in ivory silk. Eira Reed moved with the same confident grace that had captivated me at our first meeting. But now there was something more absolute certainty. She knew exactly who I was, what I'd become, and she'd chosen me anyway. Not as a consolation prize or a rebound, but as an equal partner in the empire we were building together. The guest list read like Northshire's power directory, every secret. I'd collected every alliance I'd forged, every carefully managed relationship had led to this moment. But the two faces I most wanted to see were tucked away in the back corner. Trying to remain invisible, Ragnar Reed sat rigid in his seat, his jaw clenched as he watched his sister marry the man he'd tried to destroy. Beside him, Desdemona looked pale and hollow, shadow of the vibrant woman who'd once commanded every room she entered. This can't be happening, I heard her think as Eira reached the altar. He's marrying into the Reed family, into Ragnar's family. How did we lose control of this so completely? Ragnar's thoughts were darker. He planned this. Somehow that bastard planned all of it. My own sister, ... As I took Eira's hands in mine, I caught their eyes across the cathedral. The look I gave them was one of calm triumph, not bitter vengeance, but quiet satisfaction. They'd thought they were discarding a broken man. Instead, they'd created exactly the kind of strategic opponent who understood that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was construction. I love you, Eira whispered, her green eyes sparkling with genuine joy. I love you too, I replied, meant it completely. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the kiss we shared was nothing. Like the desperate affection I'd once felt for Desdemona. This was partnership. Power. Two people who'd found in each other exactly what they'd been looking for. As we walked back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I felt the weight of every secret I knew. Every alliance I'd built, every carefully. An orchestrated step that had led to this perfect moment. Desdemona had canceled our wedding for her ex-boyfriend. Now I was married to his sister, surrounded by the power structure I'd conquered. Having turned my greatest humiliation into my greatest triumph, the old Lysander Hayes had died in that empty ballroom 8 months ago. The man walking out of this cathedral was someone entirely different. Someone who understood that sometimes the best way to win is to make your enemies realize they never stood a chance. Outside, photographers captured our first moments as a married couple. Tomorrow, those pictures would be on the front page of every society publication in the state. Ragnar and Desdemona would see them everywhere they went, constant reminder of how thoroughly they'd been outplayed. But as Eira and I stepped into our future together, I wasn't thinking about them anymore. They belonged to my past, to the weak man I'd once been. The empire we were building together was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.